Okay, so do you want to start off? So this is for session two, She Who Speaks Abundance. We're going to talk about the ladder experiment, and I guess this will be the gateway to how we first started testing the law. Is this how you first started testing it with the ladder experiment?
Right. I that was the very first test that I did. And I also read a book, and I cannot remember the name, but it talks about just testing different things in reality. Like, think of it gave you like a set of items or things you might see when you're out and about. For example, beach balls. And it'd be like focus on beach balls and see, and then kind of let it go, and then see if you see beach balls around.
Right. Yeah.
And so at the time we were traveling, and I think I pretty much saw everything that I tested. Within a day or two, I was like, I saw a billboard with one of the items on there, and I was like, what? This is crazy. It actually
Yeah.
works.
Okay, cool. So we can talk about that. Um,
So there's a
okay.
lot of tests, and I would love to. Are we just like hashing it out right now? Are we going to record this?
It is recording. It is recording. Okay, let's start again. Let's start from the
Okay,
very
okay.
beginning.
Okay,
The
then well, before we start, I think for you too, it would be really good to share your story of, um, when you were just making like a regular kind of amount of money on Amazon, and then you tried whatever technique, and your money flow just like shot up.
yeah, yeah. Did I
So
talk
if there
about
was a
that at
particular,
all? No, I
I
didn't.
mean, I think you briefly mentioned it, but you didn't talk about like specific techniques you used and how you really
Right.
like brought it
Yeah.
out into reality.
Okay. Okay. So, okay. You want to start or you want me to start?
I'll start. If you are you have you hit record again or no? We're just gonna clip
Yeah,
that out.
I'll clip it out.
Okay. Welcome to our second episode of She Who Speaks Abundance. I'm Kelly Williams, and this is,
Cheryl.Andrisani.
and we have decided to bring two powerful women together to talk mostly about our techniques that we have used and studied with Neville Goddard under the law of assumption. And we have both used multiple other tools and techniques as well, and we might pull those in. But the general underlying focus of this podcast is bringing to life the keys and concepts from Neville Goddard and bringing them to you in a way that you can really practice and change your reality the way we've changed our reality.
Yeah, so one of the very first things that the law of attraction, the law of assumption teaches is to basically just see what you want to manifest in your mind, believe that you have already received it, and then let it go. And then notice in your reality when it does show up for you, because it is guaranteed to show up for you. But we really needed to test it to actually see if it works and to gain that confidence in ourselves that it actually does work. So, one of the things that Kelly and I were speaking about recently when we first started testing this, one of the techniques, well, it's not really a technique, but it is a test where Neville talks about, it's called the ladder experiment, where you are to imagine yourself. I think he said for the first 3 days,
Yes,
imagine
yes.
yourself climbing a ladder. And so you don't, when you're imagining, you don't see yourself from afar climbing the ladder, but you actually are in it. You are doing it. You imagine yourself. The ladder is right in front of you. So you would grab the sides of the ladder and then literally feel yourself putting your foot on the step and then pulling yourself up. That's what it means to put yourself in there in first person. You feel yourself actually in the motion of doing it rather than just kind of imagining yourself doing it. You have to feel it. And then after that, you are to say that I will not climb a ladder, right? After that, I will not climb a ladder. And what the fascinating thing about this is they seem contradictory, right? Because you're imagining yourself climbing a ladder, but then you're saying, I will not climb the ladder. And it seems like it's the opposite, but it actually isn't because you're still focused on the ladder. And it's amazing where people have tested it and it works, especially with people that don't normally climb ladders, and then they find themselves actually in the motion of doing it. And what's really funny is sometimes people don't even realize when they're in the action of doing it until afterwards, where they say, holy smokes, I actually climbed a ladder, right? Did you do that, Kelly? Did you try it?
Yes, and I'm trying to remember the specific. I know I climbed a ladder in those 3 days, but I'm trying to remember the specific circumstances because it was kind of that way where I didn't make the connection between I'm doing the ladder exercise, now I'm climbing a ladder until later I was like, oh, I did climb a ladder. And also when I did the ladder exercise, I did not I missed doing the part where you say, I will not climb a ladder. I will not climb a ladder. And for me, SATS is very powerful. So I just did where, as I was falling asleep at night, really saw myself climbing a ladder. And, it worked very, very quickly. And some people find that SATS is difficult to do. And that's why there's so many tools and techniques, is something might work better for you than it does for someone else and vice versa. Some people don't find sats to be believable, or they just maybe they can't get themselves in that it's that state right before you fall asleep, like you're feeling drowsy and you're kind of nodding off but you're not quite there, and you can nod off while you're doing it but you're watching yourself take the action while you're doing it. And I do think adding the statement of I will not climb a ladder after that makes it more powerful, because for some reason with the subconscious, when you say, the subconscious doesn't really know the word no. And sometimes when you say I will never do that, it's almost like it guarantees it's going to happen. I said I would never move to New Orleans. That is the filthiest place in the United States. And then guess what? So that was about the year Hurricane Katrina happened. I said, I would never live there. How could those people even live there? Like, they're crazy. And then 7 years later, my husband got orders, and that was not on our list. And that's where we got stationed. I
Yeah.
also said I would never get a tattoo because you can't change your mind. And now I'm like heavily tattooed. So never say never if you don't want it to come true.
Well, that's it, right? Whether or not we're focused on the having it or the lack of it, we're still focused on it. And people don't seem to understand that. Now, for people that are new to Neville Goddard's work, do you want to just explain about what SATS is and what it stands for?
Yes, so SATS is one of the exercises and techniques that is taught by Neville Goddard, and it stands for state akin to sleep. So and it could be also called daydreaming, if you're just sitting in a meditative state, if it's easier for you to kind of not fall asleep when you're sitting or like sitting back in your office chair and just really relaxed, eyes partially closed. Or it could be before you go to bed, just, when you're dozing off. I also enjoy doing it. Sometimes when you wake up in the morning and you don't want to get out of bed and you're kind of like dozing off and waking up and dozing off and waking up. If I find myself doing that, I always try to use that time to imagine certain things that I desire. So if I'm like, oh, right now I'm, trying to manifest more money, I'll imagine $100 bills or money flowing to me or a new opportunity. So whatever the case may be, you just kind of imagine yourself in that scenario as if you were dreaming, but you're not dreaming. And another situation I used it for a couple years ago, and this was one of the other first things that I manifested was I bought a car that was a lemon, and then I was like, okay, now I'm going to get what I really want and just make this happen the way I want it to happen, right? Because this other situation didn't work out. And so I said, I've always wanted a Chrysler 300. Like, this is the car I want. And I didn't know how I was going to get a loan, how I was going to pay for it. And I'm like, I'm going to use stats and just imagine myself driving around in a Chrysler 300. And within like a week, they were like, oh, we brought this like blue Chrysler down for you. Do you want to test drive it? And loan like that. They didn't even like look at I mean, not that I didn't make enough money, but they didn't like nitpick my credit. I got a good interest rate. And I've had some people say to me on the Neville Goddard pages, and I think people like take things way too far. They were like, well, you didn't get the car for free. There's nothing guaranteed in Neville Goddard's work that you're going to get things for free. And in my opinion, in my experience, everything is an energy exchange. So there's really nothing that's free. Someone might appreciate things you've done for them or appreciate your presence in their life and they give you something. There's still an exchange of energy. It may not be that you gave them money. And that's just my personal opinion, but sometimes you do get things for free, but I think there's always some type of energetic exchange. And just because you pay for something or get a loan for something doesn't mean that it's not a blessing and you didn't manifest that thing. Like
Yeah.
getting a house, not everybody's going to get a house for free, right?
Hmm.
You're going to be paying for it. You're going to build it. You're going to do something for it. You have to like still take inspired action. You don't just sit and do sats and then like something just like pops right in front of your face without you getting up and doing anything.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And people think that it's like a magic, that it'll just appear. And no, you have to be the version of yourself that already has it. And that will require you to act a certain way, think a certain way, feel a certain way. Um, yeah, the people that say that it doesn't work are the ones that, you know, don't think that there has to be an exchange of energy. There absolutely has to be, right? Because then there is an imbalance. Now, I do want to just also mention, thank you so much for explaining SATs to our listeners. But what I want to say about that, because it really, for me, it's really important to understand why these techniques work. And the way Neville explained it, so state akin to sleep is that really sleepy, relaxed state before you're about to drift off to sleep. And the reason why it's important to be in a very relaxed state is because that's when your subconscious mind is most open to impression, and as you're sleeping, the subconscious mind is still working. It's still awake. The subconscious mind never goes to sleep. But what's the beautiful thing about this is because you're in that sleepy state, your conscious mind is not going to interfere as much in your imaginal act when you're imagining what you have or what you want is already into being, right? You already have it. And the reason why this is important to do it when you're in that relaxed state and when your conscious mind isn't so active is because then your conscious mind is not there to like block it
Bring up
or
the
like
how.
yeah, like all of these things, like all of the how is it going to happen, or all of the doubts and the fears that our conscious mind is, very logical in thinking, right? When we're in that sleepy state, the conscious mind is more quiet. And that's why the subconscious mind is more open to impression during that sleepy state. So even like you said, when you're daydreaming, it's like you're just relaxed and you're just enjoying doing it because it feels good. And a really important thing to note is you really want to get your feelings involved in it, right? I think that it's really important for us to do this work so that we can stretch our capacity to receive it and make it start to feel natural to us, right? Because we can think it with our mind all the time, but if our body is in fight or flight mode, or it's like, just like, no, it's not happening, if it feels threatened, then you're not going to take the actions that match what your mind is thinking. So, as we do this imaginal act for the fun of it and, just enjoying what it would feel like to have it, it's like you're really creating an impression on your subconscious mind. And like you said, the subconscious mind is always saying yes. It always accepts whatever we're feeding it, whether or not it is aligned with what we want or not aligned with what we want. If we're focused on the subconscious mind is saying that's what she wants, right? And I think that this is where people have an issue because they're not focused on what they want. They're actually putting all of their attention on the lack of it. And as we
And the
keep
how.
and the how that trips them up so much. And Neville says, you don't need to know the how. The how part is not your job. Your job in the manifestation process is to cultivate that feeling or that trust and that faith that what you asked for will be given to you. In the spiritual realm, it is given right away. Ask and you shall receive. Okay. But in the 3D realm, the world that we live in, it there's a difference in receiving it. Like time, well, actually, there's not even any time, but there is this.
Our
It's a
perception of
slower
time.
level. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and so we have to. Our job is to remain in the state of the wish fulfilled. Keep leaning into our faith, and it is done. And then just enjoy the daydream, enjoy the imaginal act that you set out for yourself. And it really should be something really simple. Like a lot of times we allow our imaginations to go crazy, and Neville really speaks about simplifying it, right? When you simplify it, like it could be if you want to manifest more money, or if you want to manifest, let's say, a raise, or a promotion. All you need to do is imagine somebody that would be somebody that would congratulate you. Just imagine them saying, "Hey, congratulations on the promotion," or "Congratulations on the raise," and then you just reply back, "Thank you." That's it. We make it so complicated. And as we, introduce more things into the imaginal act, that's going to open the door to doubt and fear and wanting to know how it's going to happen. But that part is not our process. So when you keep it only to 2 or 3 sentences at the most, you actually stay focused, and it allows you not to get distracted by other things, right? Now, for me, one of the very first things that I tested the law with was back in 2018. It was January 2018. I was scrolling through Facebook and I saw pictures of my sister and her 19-year-old daughter in Cancun. And they were on a trip there celebrating my niece's 19th birthday. And my sister was posting everything, like videos and pictures of them on the beach, of them in their room, of all the restaurants that they had gone to, and all the different foods that they were eating, right? And when I was looking at her pictures, during that time, I was in a time period where I really wanted to go on a girls' trip. I had been married for like 25 years, and I had never been on a trip with my girlfriends, right? I got married really young. My husband and I found out we were pregnant right after we went to college, and it was just struggle. It was like a struggle bus, you know. We started in lack, but I never got to go on a girls' trip. And I'm like, seeing everybody, it seemed like everybody was on a freaking girls' trip on my Facebook feed. And I was so jealous. And when my sister posted that, those pictures and the videos, I was so jealous. Like I'm ashamed to say that I was jealous of my sister and my niece. Like what a bitch, right? Like I should have been happy for them. That's my sister. But then I was feeling sorry for myself. I was in that victim mentality. Like, my God, my sister's younger than me. Her daughter is younger than my daughter. I had never been on a trip with my own daughter, you know? And so I was kind of like bitchy and resentful. So when I looked at that, and I noticed, so this is one of the things that Neville says is start off with observing yourself, right? Because the way that you feel and the thoughts that you're thinking is like sending out a signal out into the universe, which means that that's what's going to come back to you. And I didn't realize this all my life. And so this is when I started testing it. I'm like, you know what? I don't like the fact that I'm not happy for my sister and that I'm actually quite jealous and envious of her. And I noticed that within me, and that did not feel good. So, anyways, I was sitting on my dining room table. I paused um, the, no, I played the video again of her being on the beach so I could hear the beach waves, right? And I could hear the birds in the background and I could hear the breeze. And anyways, I just closed my eyes. I had that playing. I closed my eyes and I sat there for maybe 10 minutes at the most. And I imagined what it was like to be sitting on the beach. I felt the beach bed on my back. I felt the sun, the warmth of the sun on my skin. I heard the beach waves and I imagined that I opened my eyes and there was a beach right there. I've been on a beach before, so I know exactly what that feels like, right? But I just played that imaginal act in my mind over and over again. Then um, she was posting these pictures of her in the restaurants, right? There was a steak dinner and it looked so good and it looked so juicy. And we all know what a steak smells like, right? If you're not if you're a carnivore, you know what a steak tastes like. And so I imagined that. I imagined sitting at the restaurant, the chair on my back, the table in front of me. I imagined this plate right there. I imagined cutting into the steak and I know what the steak tastes like, right? And just savoring in that enjoyment. And then that was it. I let it go. I'm like, yeah, that was great. And then when I went and looked at my sister's pictures again and video afterwards, it was a totally different reaction. I was actually happy for my sister. You know, I was like grateful that she had posted the video and the pictures so that I was able to experience that too, right? So a totally different outlook on it after just 10 minutes of doing this. And then I just let it go. I was happy for her. I enjoyed whatever. And then I just let it go. But then 2 weeks later, these two moms from my son's hockey team came up to me and they said, you know what, Cheryl? We just booked a trip and we want you to come with us. And I'm like, oh my God, I would love to. But my husband will not likely agree to that. He was a coach of my son's hockey team. And I'm like, yeah, but he probably won't let me go. And I suffered from a lot of guilt because at the time I was just at home with my kids, right? I was not making any money. And everything that was part of our finances was brought in by my husband's company. And so I'm like, there is no way that, I want to spend any of the family money on myself. Like I thought that that would be really greedy and selfish of me, right? So that was a common theme for me, feeling guilty about money and not bringing in as much as my husband was, right? So my friend said, "Don't worry, we'll talk to him," because my husband wanted their sons. He was building the team for the next season and he wanted their kids. And so they said, "Don't worry, we'll talk to him. We'll tell him that if he lets you go on this trip, then we'll bring our kids back to the team next year." So they were kind of like bribing him. And I was like, okay, try it. Right. Sure enough, my husband didn't want to look like a jerk. And he's like, if you want to go, then just go. And I was like, really? So I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going, girls. And I asked the girls where they were going. It was Cancun. They had already booked it, right? It was Cancun, and it was the exact resort that my sister was at, where I was doing the Imaginal Act. So 5 weeks after doing this Imaginal Act, I was literally sitting on the exact same beach bed as my sister was. I went to the same restaurants and I ordered the same food. It was so wild. And, even when I was thinking about going on this trip with these girls, I'm like, you know what? These are new friends, but I had never been on a trip with any of my old high school friends. And I really, wanted to go with friends that I knew really well, right? So I went to I needed to get my passport renewed, and you need to put two references on the passport. So I just put two of my longtime girlfriends. I knew that they wouldn't have a problem, me using them. And then I called my girlfriend later that night and I'm like, just to let you know, I had to renew my passport. I put you down as a reference. And she says, "Oh, where are you going?" And I'm like, "I'm going to Cancun on a girls' trip. I'm so excited." And she says, "Take me with you." And I'm like, "Hell yeah, come with me." And literally the next day, she booked in because the timing was that her husband was on a boys' trip at the time. And she's like, hell, if he's gone on a boys' trip, I'm going on a girls' trip too. So literally the next day, she booked the trip with us. And I'm like, so I got my manifestation of going on my girls' trip, going to the exact same resort that my sister was at. Do you know how many like resorts there are in Cancun? And it happened to be that one. Never mind. Out of the entire world, how many resorts there are in the entire world, or even in the Caribbean alone. And it happens to be that exact one. So now I'm like, this is the way that manifestation is supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be that easy, where you just imagine that you have it, you do it for the fun of it, you do it because it feels good, you do it because you want that to happen for you, and then you just let it go. You like live in faith and trust that I don't know how it's going to happen, but it will, right? And we generally overcomplicate things because that's who we are as humans. But every time I doubt my manifestation is going to happen, I always fall back onto that story. It's like, am I complicating things right now? Yeah, I am, because it should be that easy, right? So, anyways, that was my wild story. And I fall on that all the time when I find myself in a state of stress or worry or doubt. I always fall back onto that story. Yeah, it was
I love
wild.
that. Like, am I overcomplicating things? And to go along with that, the other story that I did want to share today is, and I disappeared for 2 years. everywhere. Because I had to get super freaking focused. I was overcomplicating things. I was all over the place. And my husband and I were literally in the middle of like getting a divorce. And I was like, how do I clean this up? Like, I just blew up my entire life. I have a freaking house that's like in the middle of being remodeled. I can't do this on my own. Like, my husband was still my best friend and I didn't want to lose him, but I didn't, I wanted our relationship to be different. I wanted us to both show up differently. And, we were going, I mean, the week after we split up, he was at the attorney's office. We were going to get a divorce. There was like no separation, nothing. And as we were going through these moments, I was like, I don't know how we're going to move through this. But I just started imagining the two of us on the back deck of our house, which hadn't even been built, drinking coffee in the morning. Cause that's like, we like to do that in the morning, you know? And so I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna imagine us like drinking coffee and we're happy and we're together and we're fine and we're enjoying life and doing the things that we like to do. And then what was happening at the time was clearly not in the realm of that at all, right? I mean, it was like utter chaos. But I kept coming back to that, and like the chaos and the fight that we were in at that moment, or the stress, we would go get into these situations and we would move so quickly through them. I'm like, we were in a place where it's like there might be no reconciliation, but then I'm imagining this, and then it was just like it just swept on by. And so a lot of people ask me like, well, how did you work it out? How'd you do this or whatever? And it's like, I just go back. I mean, yes, there were things that happened on that bridge, but I could say, well, we did this and then we said this and that, but it's like, why overcomplicate it? I mean, I imagined this. I knew that we were going to move forward in a good place, and we did.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's not make it complicated. A big part of the manifestation process is living in faith. And, even though you cannot see it, I mean, our job is to still remain focused on what we want. And the number one step in Neville's fundamentals is being aware. It's self-observation. Notice how you're reacting to life. And so, if you wanted your marriage to work out, well, then anytime you have any doubts or fears or anything that opposes that idea from manifesting, it's like our job is to just surrender that and let that go, knowing that we don't want to add any energy into anything that we do not want. For me, I think it's like, I don't want to send God or the universe, however you want to address this power within you. You do not want to send it mixed signals. You want to be super clear on what it is that you want. And people will have an issue doing this, and especially at the beginning, because we have to train ourselves to think a totally different way, right? And that can be hard. And a lot of people get discouraged at first. But trust me from my own experience and Kelly's experience that if you continue to persist in in what you want happening, then you have to notice your habits and your patterns. Like for me, I had that habit and pattern of always feeling stressed, right? Or feeling guilty. That was one of my habits, is to live in a state of guilt and shame, ever since I was a little kid. Like, I mean, I don't want to blame my parents or anything, but they themselves taught me unknowingly, here's the thing, it's unknowingly. They didn't know how to be the creators of their reality. So how could they teach me? Right. And I vowed to be the one after reading all these books. I vowed to be the one in my family to stop this pattern, right? This generational, all these generational beliefs that have been passed down from generation to generation. And I saw it, I witnessed it because my grandmother was super, super superstitious. Like, I'm like, where does she get all of these beliefs? Right. And I'm like, no, I don't choose to believe that anymore. Those beliefs of lack and limitation, especially from my parents being immigrants to Canada, starting here with nothing, coming from a poor country to begin with, and they had a vision themselves, that come to Canada and, Canada's a world of opportunity. And they saw that vision, but it was hard because they lived with lack and limitation. um, you know, just like a lot of people in this world hearing, we can't afford it, or that's too expensive, or be grateful for what you had, which for me was like, we're taught to be super humble. And if we wanted more, we weren't grateful for what we had. And I believed in this God that was outside of me, that was judging me and, just waiting for me to condemn me and say or do the wrong thing and I'm going to be going to hell. So it was like I
Same,
lived
same.
with that fear for so long. But when you start doing this work and know that you know what, you are you have the power of God that dwells within you. And we just have to learn how to work with it. How does this all work? And this is what we're here on this podcast to try to teach everybody is that we really need to start thinking in alignment with who we want to be and what we want to have in this world, and that we've been given the free will to choose whatever it is that we want without any guilt, without any shame, and that it is actually our birthright to have it. If we want it, we can have it. We just have to somehow convince ourselves to believe it, right? To be open to possibilities. We may not even believe it at first, right? But at least leave
Mm.
yourself open to possibility.
And it really doesn't matter where you started from. I've had people say, well, you've always been successful and you have a master's degree and you've never been poor. You don't know what it's like. But I've also met rich people who have money, who have a very broke mindset. So the lack mindset, the being acting like you're broke can span any income level. And if you go research it, there are so many people who literally had nothing. Actually, most of the self-made millionaires started from nothing. Elmer Lockhart Jr. was in prison for 8 years, and he spent his time meditating in prison, studying Neville Goddard, imagining himself. He literally killed a guy. I think it was a cop, and he got out earlier than he should have, and now he's a millionaire. Reagan Hyler had not stepped away because she was burned out. She was trying to hustle instead of actually using her creative power. Now she's like maybe she's even a billionaire. I don't know. She's definitely a multimillionaire. But it does not matter where you start in the amount of money you have right now or the things that you can hold right now. I do think if you are very much in the lack mindset, you need to, like you mentioned earlier, and I've heard this from other teachers, you do need to start stretching and becoming comfortable and imagining yourself holding that. And what would it feel like to you to hold that? And if you feel like your nervous system's kind of freaking out a little, you've got to keep practicing, the imagination, the becoming comfortable with it. That's what matters, not the, okay, well, I'm going to go start a business and then I'm like going to call all these people and I'm going to ask them to be my client. I've done that before. Trust me, it doesn't work.
Hmm.
And you'll hate your life. That's like how Reagan Hyler was. She was hustling and trying to get these people to, I want X amount of money and it's going to be from these people. No, you just have to live in the end and imagine it and know that it's coming to you and become the person inside that has those things, that feels comfortable having those things and is not living in a lack mindset, and realize that there's infinite possibilities here.
Yeah, totally agree with what you're saying because there really is a difference from taking action in your power or taking action from a place of force, trying to force something into being. And that's not the way that it works. Usually, when you're in a place of trying to force it to happen, that's actually rooted in lack, right? Something that I have learned over the years is that how can I cultivate that feeling within me that I already am who I say that I want to be, and then become magnetic to those experiences instead. And this is actually a much easier way of doing things, right? You are actually going to enjoy yourself instead of feeling like you have to hustle your way um, into it. And there's nothing wrong with hustle. I think that, hard work definitely will pay itself off. But for me, it's like I would rather work smart than hard.
Yeah.
And my husband always said that to me, and I was just like, yeah, okay, let's do it. But um, how many times have we grown up hearing you have to work hard for your money? You know what I mean? You got to put in
Yeah,
the reps, and
it's another limiting belief, another programming. Also, real quick before I forget, sorry to interrupt, but going back to the how your parents said I can't afford that, be grateful, that's to it. Now, when my kids were younger and before I knew how powerful those words were, which I always tried to give my kids most of what they want because I never had that. And that was always really just really like hurt my heart. It's like, it's weird because as a kid, you're like, wait, like I can't have anything I want because
Mhm,
you come here knowing who you are. And then your parents are like, no, you can't have that. No, you can't have that. We can't afford that. And you're like, wow, really? Why? So I'm always really careful with my children. There are certain times where I'm like, no, not right now. But I never say we can't afford that, which I would be
mhm,
lying anyway, unless it was like $1 million. But or that's too expensive, or it's like, okay, let's like my daughter wants her own house in the backyard. I'm like, okay, like let's work up to that point, like we can't just
yeah.
like drop a house in the backyard. But other than that, I'm mostly like, okay, yeah, we can make that work.
Mhm,
And it's not about, and the saying that you spoil your kids too, if you do that, spoil your kids, to me, that's like milk gets spoiled, right? So what, you're ruining your kids by like giving them things that they desire. You're
mhm,
literally teaching them that their desires are not of God and not good.
mhm. Yeah.
What do you think
Yeah.
about that? How do you play
Well,
that out in your family?
For me, I think that definitely, like, I catch myself now, like, I wasn't conscious that I was doing this stuff with my first two kids. I am It was actually when my third was born is when I actually started doing this work. So even my kids, my two older ones, grew up with lack and limitation because I wasn't aware that I was doing it. Right. But one of the beautiful things about this work is that we can imagine lovingly for other people. Right. We're that powerful. Because if we imagine people a certain way, then they have to show up in our experience that way. If we can cultivate that belief, right, and that feeling and imagine lovingly for them. So I'm super conscious now about what I've taught my youngest son, and I live it, right? Because You can say things all you want, but it really is our actions that teaches our children, right? So anytime something happens, I very much try not to get stressed out. I very much try to, give him the impression that no matter what comes our way, we can handle it. It will get figured out, and to be really in this calm energy, right? And to gain that confidence in ourselves. Like, I don't want to train him out of what we innately knew as we entered this world, right? Exactly like what you said. We come to this life knowing how powerful we are, and then we're trained to forget it, right? So I honestly believe that words are powerful. What we say behind the words I am is like casting a spell on us. And that's why it's called spelling, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I'm very conscious, very cognizant of what I am saying. And but that comes with practice, right? That absolutely comes with practice. But what our job as parents and the best thing that we can do for our children and our families and everybody that we love is imagine them the way that they want to see themselves or the way that they want to be. I've done it for my two older kids. They're very successful. I've done it for my youngest too, and he's, really successful with the things that he's done. And we'll get into stories about that later on because even parenting is a huge part of who we are and how we can use these teachings to really, you know, um, manifest and imagine the best for them, right? We do
Right.
everybody. It's like a ripple effect. The impact that we can have, not just with our own lives, but everybody's lives around us. And this podcast is part of that too, right?
Yeah, get the word out. That's why
Get
we're
the
speaking
word out.
abundance and life to people.
Right. Yeah. Too many people in this world speak in terms of lack. And now that Kelly and I have done this work, we realize that it's a choice that people are making, but most people are making it unconsciously. And that's the work that we're doing here is trying to make people conscious of what they're doing and how, becoming conscious of it will improve your life for sure. So,
Yes,
any
in all
last
areas.
words, Kelly, before we hop off?
I think that's it. And there are so many tools and techniques, as I mentioned in the beginning, not just Neville Goddard, but other teachers that, have that foundation of Neville Goddard that have kind of added on. And I know there are people who are like Neville Goddard 100%. I don't do anything else. But for me, if I see another technique that someone has used and I try it out and it works, I mean, I'm the conscious creator, like Neville Goddard is amazing and taught amazing things, but like he's not my God, right? Just like
Mhm.
anybody outside of you is not the force that you're creating that teacher to teach you. You're drawing that teacher in to teach you. Just
Mhm.
like if we get drawn into someone else's space, you ask to be shown these things, even if you find it triggering at first. And I've had teachers who have triggered me.
Mhm.
But yes, there's so many techniques out there, and I think the biggest takeaway is to have fun and play with different techniques and try it out and see. I mean, you could literally be like Cheryl and just sit on the dining room table and say, I don't want to be pissed off anymore. So let me imagine myself there.
Yeah.
And then no expectation of anything. And then boom, your life changes. And we have so many more stories about, as Cheryl mentioned, just parenting, day to day living, ways we put this into practice. And we're still up leveling and changing our consciousness and reminding ourselves on a daily basis, trying to keep our mental diet clean. And we're willing to share too, like things that we do, mistakes that are made, and how we kind of course correct as we go.
Yeah. I think that you made a really good point there because a lot of people expect like these really big events to happen. But truly, change happens in all the little everyday things that we do, right? Because that's what makes up the most of our life is all these day-to-day things. And it's not the big things. It's not like getting a car or getting a house or winning the lottery or getting $1 million. It's all these little daily habits that we build on to start changing our belief system that really is the work behind the bigger manifestations happening for us, right? If you can't do it with the little things, then I'm sorry, it's going to be difficult for the big things to happen. Um, but all in all, we get what we believe. Okay. And that's really important to understand. So if you believe that this work will work for you, then it will. But if you're going to say this shit doesn't work, well, then yeah, it's not going to work for you. So for Kelly and I, we really want everybody to enter this with an open mind, be open to possibility and say, what if? What if this actually could work for me? And can you lean into that as much as possible, right? A lot of times we want to hold on to our lack and limitations because we believe that that's who we are. But the truth of the matter is that is not who you are. That's only who you think you are. But you are
Right.
so much greater. You are so much greater than what you know. And we're going to hope that we convince you. No, we will convince you.
Yes, absolutely. We imagine lovingly for all of the people listening to this podcast.
Yeah, perfect.
So, with that, we will talk to you next time.
Okay. Thanks, Kelly. And we'll talk to
Thank you,
everyone
Cheryl.
soon. Okay. Bye.
Bye.